guy standing there, and Jesus goes, okay, now open your eyes. And he opens his eyes and he says, I want you to catch this. I want to read it, make sure I get it right. He says, I see people, they look like trees walking around. We'll get to that. I see people, they look like trees walking around. And then Jesus does it again. Jesus puts his hands on them. Let's read it. It says, once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes, and his eyes were open. He could see. So, squint your eyes a little bit. Squint your eyes a little bit. You're seeing people look like trees. Okay. Alright. So Jesus puts his hands on him, and all of a sudden he can see just fine. You see, he received a little bit of Jesus. Everybody say a little bit of Jesus. A little bit of a touch of Jesus, but Jesus had more for him. Jesus didn't want him to just see a little bit. He didn't just want him to see just a little bit of people like walking around like trees. Jesus wanted him to see. And I want to tell you guys something. Sometimes we get satisfied with just our little bit of Jesus. And I want to kind of piggyback off of what Janetta spoke on last week. Everybody give it up for Janetta. Janetta talked about last week how just a little bit of Jesus can change our lives. How just a little bit like hot sauce can change our lives. But I want to tell you something. That doesn't mean we're supposed to be... Everybody pay attention. You guys are talking because my mic is loud. A little bit of Jesus can change our lives, but that doesn't mean we're supposed to be satisfied with a little bit of Jesus. Again, a little bit of Jesus can change our lives, but that doesn't mean we should be satisfied with a little bit of Jesus. So Jesus touches him again, and Jesus restores his sight. He can see perfectly. Some of you say, well, Tommy, how does he know what trees are like? Because it says, then his eyes were open and his sight was restored. And he saw everything clearly. How does he know what trees look like? Because his sight was restored. Meaning he had it at one point. Somehow he lost it. And now he has it again. So, now he can see perfectly fine. He's still looking at Jesus. And Jesus says something very specific to him that's really interesting. Some of you are still talking. I'll just drink my water and wait. How you doing, buddy? Well, you can't put them back on. All right. So we can see perfectly fine. Then Jesus tells them one last thing. He says, don't go back into the village. Don't go back into the village. And I can see this guy kind of standing here like, okay. And I can see people, you and me, reading this story in the Bible. And we kind of focus on the part that this guy was blind and now he can see, and Jesus did another miracle. Chalk it up for Jesus. Another blind guy healed. Woo, great. And Jesus goes on and we're all excited. And we skip over this little verse where Jesus says, don't go back to the village. And sometimes in big fancy people that know all kinds of stuff about God, they debate about this story as to why he shouldn't have gone back to the village, why he shouldn't have this, why he shouldn't have that. But I will tell you what it means to me. Some of you are still talking. Jesus tells them, don't go back to your old life. You notice the beginning of the story. Jesus leads him out of the village. Sometimes, guys, to get a touch from God, you need to leave the place that you are. Some of you might be wondering, why is it that God isn't doing anything in my life? Why isn't any special things happening? Why aren't I seeing my friends' lives change and seeing my family life get better? Why isn't this? Why isn't that? I wonder, have you been willing to leave your former life? Because the truth is, I think Jesus constantly, all the time, as we go through this life, is compelling us and asking us to move forward, to come out from where we were so we can go to a new place. But oftentimes we just stand right here because this is where we're comfortable. We just sit in our aqua chair because that's where we're comfortable. Jesus leads him out of the village. The guy is humbled, receives a touch from God, and he says, look, don't go back to the village. Don't go back to the place of your old life. You want to know something else that happens? We'll come here on a Wednesday night. Or maybe you have a Bible club at your school and something awesome happens there. Maybe you're here on a Sunday morning, or maybe you're just praying on your way to school or something like that, and something great happens in your life. Maybe God has touched you and healed you, but you know what we do? We end up going back to our old life. Some of you, I'm sure, you have prayed that the Lord would heal you from using foul language. I'm sure some of you have prayed, God, give me the strength to not listen to the music that I'm listening to. Lord, give me the strength to not watch the movies I'm watching. Lord, give me the strength to hang out with the right people. And for a day or two, God does that for you. But believe it or not, at some point, generally, we decide to just turn around and go back to that old life. We decide to go back to our village when Jesus let us out. I can tell you the times that I've been let out of the village by Jesus. I can also tell you the times that, regrettably, I decided to go back into the village, back to my old life. Because that's where all my friends were, because that's where I was comfortable. But I want to tell you something. This is where God wants you to be. This is where God longs for you to be. Is this what you want? You can go ahead and sit down. To finish the movie clip for you, or the movie that we watched earlier, Preston, one of the greatest helicopter pilots in the Army, has to go to his commanding officer, the guy that we also seen in the video clip, and ask for help. He says, can you please help me? Commanding officer says, sure. It's not going to be easy, but sure. He then takes Preston through all kinds of crazy little weird things to try to help him. The interesting thing is, his commanding officer actually had the same trouble he did when he was younger. So he knew exactly what needed to happen in order to help Preston out. And Preston goes through that whole entire process. And he ends up taking the bag test again. And he does perfectly fine. And can I tell you something? Preston didn't struggle with that ever again. He didn't fly the helicopter perfectly fine one day, and then the next day, oh, I forgot. He didn't let his commanding officer lead him to a new life and then go back to his old life. Preston got brought into this new life, got taken out of the village, and ended up doing some awesome things. You'll have to watch the movie. The question tonight is, will you and could you have that same story? I want you to close your eyes, bow your heads. Tonight I told you a story that's near and dear to my heart. You guys don't know how awesome it is to me